Afternoon. It's great seeing so many people here. But I was thinking about it, at the same time, it's awful that there are so many people here, right? I mean, with all the things that should be occupying our headspace right now, like global warming or, the wars in the world and everything else, it kind of stinks that we have to spend so much time talking about book banning. But alas, we are, and the issue with book banning is getting worse. If you look at the numbers that are published every year by the American Library Association, the number of titles being challenged every year is skyrocketing over the past few years. And of course, it's not just the volume of challenges, but the types of books that are being challenged. I've been a librarian for about 30 years, and 30 years ago, there were book challenges 30 years ago, but it was, Harry Potter was challenged because it was, people would say, oh, it's promoting witchcraft or the occult. But the types of books that are now being challenged, as we all know, are books that are looking to suppress really important voices, Black voices, LGBTQIA voices. And it's something that we are here at DC Public Library and libraries around the country to raise awareness. I tell people, there are a lot of people tell me when I tell people that we're doing programs around Banned Books Week, they're like, oh, why are you doing that? That's not a problem in DC. No one's banning books in DC. And I mean, that's true, but we have a distinct responsibility, I think, in the district. We are, we have a lot of visibility here. DC Public Library just won the National Medal for Museum and Library Service a couple of months ago. Thank you. It's the nation's highest honor for museums and libraries. We've got tons of people who live in the district part-time from other parts of the country. So it's great to be able to do these programs and have build this awareness. And also, for those of you who live in DC, you know that our democracy here is on thin ice all the time. You've got lots of people who would love nothing more than to take away DC's limited home rule, which would make us subject to the book ban in any part of the country, in the smallest rural part of the country. So we have to be vigilant, we have to talk about it, and we have to raise our voices. So we'll get started now. I'd like to thank our speakers, organizers, and partners, Kwame Alexander, W. Kamau Bell, the Aspen Institute Arts Program, and the DC Public Library Foundation, my favorite 501c3 nonprofit. Please donate. It is now my pleasure to introduce Danielle Bossan, who is the Vice President of Policy Programs at the Aspen Institute and the Director of Aspen Institute Arts Program. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. Danielle Bossan, as described, Vice President of the Policy Programs at the Aspen Institute and Director of the Aspen Institute Arts Program. The Arts Program has a special mission at the Aspen Institute, and that's to fulfill the promise of infusing arts into public policy discussions, but also to uplift the voices of art and artists who are contributing to discussions and dialogue about society's thorniest issues, and this is certainly one of them. Today, you will hear from students, lawyers, educators, and authors, and I hope that this conversation will help you find new information, new ideas, and new questions to ask yourself. What does society owe to our children, to our authors, to our educators? What can we do to build a better society for tomorrow? I want to extend my sincere gratitude to the DC Public Library system, to People's Book, who's hosting a book fair outside of our doors. Please take a look at the titles, many of which were authored by people who you'll hear from today. I also want to thank this audience for sharing a Sunday with us. It goes unnoticed and appreciated. And finally, to thank our partner, Kwame Alexander, for helping us really brainstorm this event and coming up with the topic and areas of discussion that you'll hear about today. Kwame is no stranger to many of us in the audience, but there's some really fun facts about him that I just want to share. Why not? They're good, they're clean. So, they're Wikipedia-ish, don't worry. So, he's the best-selling author of 41 books. Yes, thank you, that's crazy, right? They've won too many awards for me to actually list in time, but Caldecott. He also is a podcaster. He is a Emmy-winning producer for his series The Crossover that was on Disney+. Yep. And he's also a proud father and reader. And so I just want to thank him for being here and welcome him to the stage. Please welcome Kwame Alexander.
I want to thank Danielle and Kaylee and the Aspen Institute for working with Sarah Grace McCandless and pulling this event off. It is so important that this kind of thing happen, and not just to sort of deal with the problems and the challenges, but to really talk about solutions. And that's why I'm really excited and why I really wanted to do this. One of the things we forget, and you can't, like my father says, you can't know what you don't know. For Black Americans, books have been banned for a lot longer than 4 or 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years, or 30 years. I mean, if you Black in America, or, think about the books that your elementary school librarian recommended or had on the shelves, or think about the books that were, in your classroom when you were in high school. I remember my AP literature teacher telling us we could write a paper. We had to write a paper to graduate on any novel in the English language, and I chose, a novel that was not on our shelves. I didn't choose Tuck Everlasting. I didn't choose Hemingway. I didn't choose Faulkner. I chose a book that was on the shelf in my home, a book called Things Fall Apart. And she gave me an F on the paper. And her first sort of response was, this is not a book, this is not an American book. And I reminded her that the assignment was to respond to a novel in the English language. And of course, the primary language in Nigeria, thanks to the Brits, was English. And the second response was that it's such a good paper, there's no way you could have written it. So, I know we often like to, traffic in the misnomer that there are two, we gotta appreciate both sides of an issue. And my opinion is that today I want to set the tone that there's really only one human side here, but there's also a place for dialogue, and a place for respect, and a place for humanity. And so how do we find that in the midst of all this? So before I introduce my buddy, I will sort of leave you all with an American love poem. I want those championing freedom, the patriots of peace, the ones who march into our schools, handcuff our history, hold our imaginations hostage, the so-called American dreamers. I want them to uncage their hearts, to cast off their chains of fear, to remember the bedtime stories that comforted them when nightmares chased sleep away, to remember the first grade teachers who read them pictured fables that showed them how to love each other and planted the seeds of possibility that blossomed into their becoming. I want them to remember how hopeful it felt to be held by their mother's songs and poems on nights when thunder ravaged the sky. I want them to know that banning a book is like banning a hug, and that is a dismal storm no child should be left behind in. I know my friend, my colleague, W. Kamau Bell, understands the importance of today's conversation and of us finding a way to move forward, because like myself, he has daughters and he wants to help them imagine a better world, and he understands that the mind of an adult begins in the imagination of a child, and what better way to enhance and beautify and empower and humanize those imaginations than through the pages of a book like the New York Times best-selling books he's written. This cat is an Emmy Award-winning producer, most recently of 1000% Me. Give it up for W. Kamau Bell, y'all.
Hello, how you doing? Give it up for Kwame Alexander. Welcome the panelists out here. Welcome to the panelists. Me and Kwame are basically exactly the same, except I'm 40 books shy of 41 books. But other than that, we are the same. It was a beautiful introduction. He said he believes this. I'm like, I do believe those things. I wouldn't have said it that well. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. We really want to get to the conversation today, so we're going to skip intros. Everybody's up here. You can Google them and find out what they do. But these are the experts here to talk about book bans with. So thank you for being here again. Bob, I want to start with you. You said something while we were sitting over there that I really was curious about. You said, we talked about being here today and what it meant, and you said, I love this work. And I thought, what an interesting thing to say for a man whose work is to stop book bans, that you love this work. Can you talk about what you meant by that? All right.
Thanks for the question. I am a lawyer. Because of that, I decided I ought to come in costume today. I've been practicing First Amendment law for over 40 years. And to me, that is just a tremendous privilege. In the course of that, I've probably done pretty much every kind of First Amendment case, but the ones that have been some of the most important to me, and I think some of the most satisfying, have been the cases that I've taken on behalf of and working with librarians. And no one, in my experience, understands the importance of freedom of expression better than librarians. And I've worked with them on cases involving internet censorship, involving the use of mandatory filters on library internet terminals, and on book bans themselves. So, even though the cause is at times depressing because of the fact that censorship is happening, and that's why you're involved in a case, it couldn't be more satisfying work.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you. Christina, you're a student at Penn State, correct? Am I correct? So I want you to talk about how students are feeling this right now, because I think a lot of times people who are not in school read the headlines and think they know where the conversation is at, no matter what the article's about. If the headline says it, if the article says it, that is the case. But are students talking about book bans right now? Are students feeling it?
Absolutely. I have an example of this. When I was in high school, which is about 3 years ago from now.
You ain't got to brag.
I remember I was in my anatomy class, and the topic of Henrietta Lacks came up. And my anatomy teacher said, because of the state of the school district right now, I don't know if I can talk about her and her importance to the history of medicine, but if you talk to your parents, maybe I can't let you borrow the book, but maybe you can go find it somewhere else. And that trickles into university, because you have students coming from different school districts, different backgrounds, and you have students who are not open-minded to learn new things, students who are open-minded to learn new things, and it creates a bit of divide even within the universities. I'm now a third year at Penn State, and I've seen different students and how the censorship has affected them and their willingness to learn, if they're scared to speak their mind, if they're scared to ask questions, to further education, which is very dangerous, because we're talking about university students who soon will become the doctors and the lawyers and the teachers of the next generations to come. This is a effect that keeps on going and going. It does not affect just the students now. It affects generations to come. It can affect us 50 years from now. And yes, students are talking about it, even in universities. I have a lot of friends who, when they hear about, things going on, they text me like, yo, this is still going on. I'm like, I can't believe this. Because there are some of us who do want to make a change, but at the same time, not many people listen to us. So I'm really grateful that the Aspen Institute reached out to us, Eden and I, as the students, because people don't want to listen to us. They don't think that we know enough. Oh, you're just 20 years old, like go back to your dorm or something. But that's not true. We care about our future. We wouldn't be sitting up here if we didn't care about what this country's going to look like in 20 years from now. So yes, students are talking about this, and it's a very important issue to us.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That was really great. It's really great to hear that perspective, but also scary to think that teachers are put in the difficult position of having to teach curriculum and not being allowed to use whatever they think is necessary to teach that curriculum because of book bans. I don't think a lot of us think of it that way. Lauren, I want you to talk a little bit about the idea that people who are for book bans would say that they don't want books in the library that has inappropriate material, you know, especially a school library. Like they don't want things in the library that has deals with controversial issues or, you know, sexuality or gender. And so we need to get those books out of there to save the kids.
I would say that we need the books in the library to save us. That's the human condition, right? And we need to create learning environments to empower teachers, librarians, school district leaders, students inside of schools to have access to the full range of who we are, what we have experienced, in ways that do not water down, that don't dilute, that don't erase, that don't silence, that don't put fear into those who are responsible for the learning process and those who are engaged in the learning process, to ask those hard questions about how did we even get here right now in this moment, on this stage, having this conversation, right? Someday, somebody's gonna answer that question, and that information needs to be available to it so that we can move forward in a way that is more reflective of this society and of the world that we live in, and that is inclusive of who we are. Students are erased by book bans. Students who are having lived experiences, who have questions about themselves, their histories, and their lives, find those answers sometimes in books because they can't go anywhere else. And that's what speaks to them and helps them affirm, find identity, have courage to ask questions, have courage to protest, have courage to exist in a world that continues to try to marginalize, minimize, and erase, and silence. And so my response is the books need to be there to save us. Because if we're not telling multiple stories, then we're not living in the reality of the world that we exist in, and we're creating a very, very narrow narrative that is really dangerous and really toxic for the future, and we've seen how bad it is in the past.
Thank you, thank you. Jill, you are the Chief Content Officer at Common Sense Media. I just want to bring that up because as a parent, thank you for having Common Sense Media. It's a website that we use in our family a lot, and not to decide necessarily how good or bad something is, just how appropriate it is for our kids to go see a movie or read a book. And a lot of times on Common Sense Media, it says the age range, but I know, well, my kid's younger than that, but I know my kid can do this, or this says this for my kid, but I know my kid can't handle this. So it's a really great resource for parents, I think, if used correctly, as a way to sort of figure out, to make sure you're putting the media in front of your kids that is most appropriate for your kids. So thank you for that. But some people would say, and the criticism is that because it's so broken down, it actually helps with book banners, because they can point to Common Sense Media and weaponize the information there to go, look, this book says it's appropriate for a kid this age, and yet it has all these things that are not appropriate for kids that age. So what would you say about that?
Sorry, the biggest challenge that we're dealing with right now. So, and it's been a bigger challenge, obviously, in the last few years. We have a really wide appeal to a broad spectrum of parents, but at the end of the day, we are providing information based on child development criteria. So what a kid is ready for at what age. So what can a kid handle? We're looking at everything from like red realistic blood to green animated blood. So within games or movies or books, etc. So it obviously is a fun place to be. But we have this huge burden and responsibility to not only help provide parents insight and information and teachers into what their kids are gonna read, watch, play, etc. But we also carry with that this fallout of, are people using our content for a way to kind of exclude and take away content from access to kids? That is an area, we were chatting about this earlier, it's an area that I look at the traffic to the website and what what areas of the world it's coming from. You can kind of make some assumptions based on that. We have a lot of teachers that are using our content and those reviews. But I think once you dig in and you get in the door of our work, once you really see the age recommendations and what aspects of a book, in this case, that we're breaking down, we're really just trying to inform people about what's in it, and you decide what's best for your kid, student, or family. But you also will find a nuance. We aren't just saying it has X number of swear words or it has this much nudity. We are really getting into what is the messaging, what's the positive messages, what does the inclusivity look like, what's the gender look like, how are these messages being broken down, who is writing the story in the first place, and then we get into conversation starters. So we really want to encourage families to have open dialogue. If it's something that scares you, all the more reason. So our other response to that is that we lean heavily into frequently challenged or banned books and review them like crazy. So we do promote them heavily on our site and encourage that kind of work to be utilized and leveraged. But it's a challenge for sure.
I would imagine you get accused, when you're doing that, you're probably accused of being political or on one side, as Kwame talked about, the one side, the two sides, when to me it's just like, this is just the information that this
Right.
we're just giving you the information.
We try and focus on being kid partisan because at the end of
Kid
the day,
partisan.
it is all about the kids, and
Nice.
we do really want to, I mean, you hit it on the head. When kids see themselves in media especially, that is how we start to feel seen, we can relate, we're reflected, and that's where so much of that growth really starts from. I would much rather have my kids do that in a book than on some of the stuff that they may or may not be watching that they don't think I know that they're watching.
Well, Bob, let's talk about that. How do people use these, resources like Common Sense Media to initiate book bans?
Whenever there have been rating systems, there have been opportunist politicians willing to take advantage of them and try and...
Wait, opportunist politicians? We're
Sorry
in
for-
D.C., sir. I don't know.
I'm sorry for the redundancy.
Okay.
But those kinds of information sources will be used by people who are intent on using censorship. And it's just like someone who has a hammer and thinks that everything looks like a nail. That's unfortunately been the case. It's been true for every rating system we've ever seen. True for movie ratings, where in one North Carolina county, the sheriff decided, well, these ratings are great. I'm going to prohibit anyone from showing a movie in my county that rated anything above G. Okay? Or video game ratings. California, about 12, 13 years ago, decided to use video game ratings as a model for state legislation to restrict what games minors could have access to. All of those were declared to be unconstitutional. And now we're seeing it in Texas, where the state adopted a law requiring that books be rated, and that if the government decided it didn't like the rating, it was going to place its own on the book. So it has been used as a tool of censorship. But the ratings themselves are useful, and particularly the work of Common Sense Media, where it's providing parents with more information about the books they want their kids to read. And used in that sense, are a really valuable tool.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about the ratings, as someone who works in Hollywood occasionally, I know that these ratings are also sometimes ratings, this is why I like Common Sense Media, because it's just, here's the information that's in the thing, in the media. It maybe said it's for this many stars, but I just want the information, because I think a lot of times even the people who create the ratings, and not talking about Common Sense Media, are actually doing it for ways that aren't actually helpful. Like I know with kids movies, at some point the people who make kids movies learn that adults don't want to see G-rated movies. They would rather see, so there aren't that many G-rated movies anymore, because we'd rather think as an adult that if it's PG, then it's for me, then I'll enjoy taking my kid to this movie.
Well, that's right, but it's like reading movie reviews too, right? You know more about the review, whether or not to trust the review, if you know the reviewer. If you're familiar with their work, you know they have good taste, a good sense about what should be in a movie or what makes a movie work. By the same token, if you know the reviewer is not so good, you know that a bad rating probably is a recommendation for the movie. And so you do have to take into account the fact that who is doing the rating makes a big difference.
That's why when Fox News says it's bad, I'm like, I'm going to go see that. Anyway, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that at the library. Anyway, maybe we have to edit that part out. Is there, for all of you, this is open up, let's start with Christina. Is there an issue about book banning that you really is the one that gets you the most charged up or the most frustrated or keeps you up at night? Is there an issue that you wish it was addressed?
That's a good question. Where do I start? My issue with book bans specifically is bans that are general. Bans, period, are horrible. But when school districts choose to ban books and they just make a general overarching ban, and here's what happens when that happens. You ban books about my culture. You ban books about my people. You ban books about how my people have been huge on building this country. That hurts the most. It hurts when you take away the history and the facts of the people who have built this country brick by brick with their bare hands, not just my culture. POC of every nationality, every identity helped to build this country to the way it is today. When that happens, you demote my people's story in this country. That is the one that hurts the most when books are being banned.
Lauren, is there an issue that you're the most charged up by?
Well, it's very similar, but from a different side. Black people, people of color, have been advocating and demanding to have our stories included in schools, in curriculum, for as long as you can think of, right?
Yeah.
When Kwame opened and he talked about being banned from books, life, limb, mutilation, all of those sorts of things. So it angers me that the hypocrisy of the book banning and the authors and the titles that are selected for banning when across the country people show up at school board meetings and say, why are we celebrating Black history for a month? Why are we celebrating Hispanic heritage for a month? Why is it this isolated time in our children's learning that we pause and take stock of and have tacos or, you know, put on the kente cloth and do all the things that people do to have these superficial representations of history and culture celebrated? So it's very similar, but it's also an acknowledgement that we want our stories told. We have created our own schools to have our stories told. We were forced to create our own schools, and then throughout time, we've continued to do that because we know that the learning that is happening inside of these schools is not just insufficient, it's harmful to our children. And so when I think about what is most pressing, I think about that dichotomous reality and the kind of sort of gaslighting that it is for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jill, what is an issue that keeps you frustrated?
I think it's the fear that these parents are putting on their kids. That to me feels like an unfair just pressure that is being laid upon kids who may have questions about their own identity or their own history or their friends' history and culture, and they aren't even allowed to seek out answers or understand their stories. And I just think, you know, for fear of parent or a teacher, the two biggest authorities in a kid's life, for fear of being told that that's not allowed, that just feels like a huge power imbalance, and just the long-term damage and effects that's having on these young students.
What about you, Bob? Is there an issue?
I think my main concern
Are the microphones?
Yeah.
is the on-off switch.
The
No,
microphones don't want us to talk about banned books. That's what's happening.
My main concern is that the culture war should not be fought out in the libraries, that no one should be able to peruse a library's shelves and figure out from that which political party happens to be in power in that area. And the politicization of this issue has been one of the things that bothers me the most. And I think it was addressed most effectively in the Library Bill of Rights, and it was written in 1939. And pardon me for just reading from this, but I don't think I can improve on the language. It says, first, books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people in the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. Second, libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be proscribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. And then third, libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. It goes on, but I think those first 3 points really illustrate what libraries are about and how it's so perverse for policymakers to subvert that. And I'll give you an example of that. I'm helping with in fighting a book ban in Texas, in filing an amicus brief in that case. And in the first round of briefing, we cited a section of the Texas Administrative Code that incorporated that language from the Library Bill of Rights. And we cited that language as explaining what the purpose of libraries were and how antithetical to that purpose was the idea of state censorship. After we filed that brief and before the case went on to its next round, the Texas legislature removed that section from their state administrative code. So again, the biggest thing I worry about is having the battle over censorship and the fight over the culture wars take place in libraries.
Wow, so they quoted Texas, you quoted Texas back to Texas, and then Texas
And
said,
it didn't like it.
I didn't say that. Oh, Texas. I know we have someone coming up from Texas later who can talk about specifically what's going on in Texas. I think the one thing you also said there was just, I think we have underrated the strength, the power, the fierceness of librarians. That librarians who we sort of in culture often take up this sort of like mousy, sort of quiet role. But if you are a librarian in 2024, you got to be tough and ready. And maybe that's always been the case, I guess. But just now we're sort of talking about book bans. You have to be ready to confront the political forces that have politicized your library.
Well, that's right. And that's why I think it's so fortunate that the librarians that I know live those principles that are stated in the Library Bill of Rights, and they're up to the task to fight that battle.
Yeah, that's great. What does the future look like? This is for everyone. Are there hopeful signs you're seeing? We can start with Jill. What is the future from your vantage point? What does the future look like? I think I understand. All right, next week. Got it. I think you said it best when you said.
I mean, I think we've heard this multiple times over, but yeah, I hope we're not having this conversation in the near future. I mean, these things need to be changing. We need to have our eyes open, and all this comes back to students and kids and just putting them first. And I mean, I've never met a kid or had a kid that was going to take everything I said and it's the law for them. So they will find and seek out information whether or not parents and teachers want them to. So we should be providing them, the best quality of that information as we can. That's our responsibility as the adults.
Absolutely. I still think you said it best when you said.
That still is followed by a big sigh.
I'm gonna quote you on that if you don't mind.
Well, it's hard not to sigh. But, I also want to say that knowledge is political, right? Who knows what information we have access to, whose knowledge is valued, is inherently political. And, I think that what is on the horizon is the way that I see so many things being connected. You know, like banning books that talk about reproductive rights in a time when reproductive rights have literally been taken away, there's a connection there. And I think that we have to be really, really honest, clear-eyed, and discerning about the way that these things are all working together to really create a more narrow lens or aperture of ourselves, of each other, and of our places in the world. And so for me, what I hope is next is some organizing that is cross-sector, that is interdisciplinary, that is people thinking together about what is the vision that we have of this world for ourselves, all of us collectively, that is really clear about the place that we have in history and that we have in the future, and doing that work together, because these things are cyclical, they repeat, they morph, they come back in different forms and shapes, and we're here now. And it's likely, again, at some point, if we don't do, right, some real clear-eyed thinking about how we're all in this together, we'll be here again at some point.
Absolutely.
It's on. Okay. So, as Gen Z, I'm a Gen Zer.
You keep bragging. Didn't you say you were 20 earlier just to hurt
I'm
our
20.
feelings? Okay.
I'm
all right,
20.
all right.
I want to speak to the Gen Z audience. I see camera 1, 2, 3, 4, and these ones here. It's time for us to lock in. Like, for real. Like, we are the, thank you. Most of us in our generation are able to vote now. So if you have not registered, please go do that. The second Monday morning is Monday morning.
You can do it online. You can do it-
Online,
yeah,
yes, you
yeah.
can do it right now, actually. I know you can split screen. Because we are the ones who are going to vote. And we're next. We are next in line to be in office. We are next in line to be the future doctors. We are next in line. We have the chance to change the trajectory of this country. And November is coming up. So mark your calendars and go out to the polls and vote. My future is that my generation steps up and be the generation we need for this country and locks in today.
Are you declaring your candidacy? Yes. I just want to know what public office you're seeking soon so we can just be a bit ready to support. I'm just curious, what is your major in?
So I'm double majoring. I'm biological, a scientist, health professions, and Spanish, and my goal is to be a bilingual doctor who advocates for women's rights as an OBGYN.
Bob, what is your major in? I'm just speak to Gen Z as a member of Gen Z, Bob. But yeah, the future.
The future, yes. Well, as you pointed out, I've been doing this a long time. And while I do want to sigh heavily when I think about these things, I really am optimistic for a variety of reasons. First of all, fighting the legal fight, that's one component of it, and I do feel optimistic that we will end up in a good place. The cases that we've been tracking around the country, you have your ups and downs, as always, but I think they're moving in the right direction, and I think that we will settle on a strong basis in law for protecting against book bans. The second thing is having dialogue like this, and particularly seeing young people get involved in this issue. It's so important because the law is only part of it. We're talking about building up a culture of free expression and one that supports free inquiry and open access to materials that are necessary for free inquiry. And the third thing is the kind of direct action that I see outside where you have people donating banned books and making sure that they're available. In Tennessee a couple of years ago, when Art Spiegelman's Mouse was banned by one local school district, its sales shot up on Amazon by orders of magnitude. And you see this kind of that response, you see the direct action outside, and when you take all of those things in combination, I remain optimistic.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad that it's not often that the older person is more optimistic than the younger person, but here we go. The one thing I'd like to also talk about, because as a parent, and I have 3 daughters, and I know that my kids, it's weird to say this, but I feel like politicians, opportunist politicians, and opportunist community leaders, and it's weird to say this, will often infantilize children. Like they're sort of, I know kids can't handle this. And I find, and I would love other parents to speak to this, that my kids are very clear when they've hit their limit.
Well, if there's one silver lining, I think that all of this is teaching kids that reading can be cool.
Yes, that's for sure. And I think that there's this sort of, and please anybody speak to this, the idea of that some people are framing this as protecting the kids, but kids generally know when they've picked up a book and this is probably I'm not ready for this. Or I remember, this is not a book, but as a kid, my mom had Richard Pryor albums. And one time I put one on the turntable, and within the first 2 minutes, I was like, nope, this is not ready for this yet. One day, but not today. And my kids do that too. They sort of go, you'll put on a movie or you'll read a book and they'll be like, I'm not ready for this. You know what I mean? So can we just talk about, give kids some respect, I guess is what I want to say there. And anybody speak to any part of that?
I love what you just said, and I just think that is the ultimate goal, is just to raise a generation of critical thinkers who can really manage their own emotions and know their limits when they need to. And I know we talk about Common Sense Media as a rating system, but really we're there to provide media literacy and digital literacy, so kids really understand the messages that are being fed to them, who, as I said before, who wrote this, and then what's in it, and can I handle it? So when we talk about you know your kid best, my kids like to get scared, so I may age something down for them, and that's for my oldest, she's born on Halloween, I think it's something in the water, and then with my younger one, she has different sensitivities, so it really does come down to them knowing themselves, you knowing your kids, a teacher knowing her classroom or his classroom, and so I really think that providing an environment, you've provided this safe environment where your kids cannot just say, oh, I have to be tough. Dad thinks I need to be tough, so I need to get through this. They know their limits. They are open about their limits. They're telling you what their limits are. I mean, that's huge. So congratulations, and keep going with that. And that's
I'm
the
a
goal,
good parent.
Can I add something?
Oh, yeah, this is open conversation. Oh, yeah.
So I think there's also another little there's hypocrisy in that, right? Because there are kids who show up at school who don't have the benefit of protection in their lives, who are living these really, really serious, challenging lives that are filled with responsibilities that some kids don't have, right? And so the question is, who are we protecting and what are we protecting ourselves from? Because we can't continue to ignore that there are so many children in the world who are living with such hardships and under such circumstances that the idea of protecting them in school, when outside of school, their lives are organized by these systems that are just creating chaos for them.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with that. I have moved all over this country, so I have experienced a lot of school districts. So my family is originally from Chicago, and I ended up going to school in Idaho for a bit, then Ohio, Idaho, and then Pennsylvania and Ohio. So I've been all over the place, and that is very true. A lot of students, school is totally different from what they see at home. But we have to put trust in our educators. To my knowledge, in Pennsylvania, to teach here for a long period of time, you need to have your master's in education or master's in something to qualify you to teach and to lead the next generation. We have to trust teachers to do their job. I'm a little bit confused when politicians tell teachers how to do their job, but they didn't go to school to educate. They went to school to be a politician. Do you see a teacher running the White House? Do you see a teacher writing bills up? No, they stay in their lane. We can't run as a country if we're always constantly trying to look to see what everyone else is doing. You need to trust your fellow person for them to do their job. And so, so that's what I have to say about that. But I really do feel like, sorry, I just get so passionate. us students should be able to make our own decisions, yes. For example, I don't want, like, you see, it's like trending on TikTok, but a lot of students like my age will bring their parents to the doctor's offices because they don't know how to fill out like health insurance policies and stuff. That should not be a world we should be living in. If you're like in your 20s and stuff, you should be able to figure things out on your own. So if we're constantly censoring students and what they're doing, we're gonna have grown adults not knowing how to function as grown adults, and that's scary.
Bob, do you have any thoughts about the way in which people say we have to protect the children is what we're talking about?
Well, most of my career has been to fight against all of these various forms of ways to protect the children, usually in behalf of some agenda or another that has very little to do with protecting children. And we see a lot of that going on with the fight over banned books, where children will be used as the excuse for a different cultural agenda. In my line of work, I tend to think of children as being the universal solvent for First Amendment rights. It's always used as the excuse, but then you have to remind the courts and politicians that there are controlling principles established by the First Amendment, and even kids have rights.
Even kids have rights. It's funny that we have to remind people of that. This is just a question I was wondering. Is there a book that you have read in your life that you then realized later was banned somewhere that you were confused by or upset by? I'll start since I asked the question. For me, I was not assigned to read the autobiography of Malcolm X in school. That was not a thing. We didn't read that in school I went to. I was assigned by Spike Lee when he made the movie Malcolm X. Like the culture assigned it to me. I was like, oh, this movie's coming out. I should read the book. And that book changed my life. Like, absolutely, that book is the most important book I've ever read. And I think about the fact that I only read it because I wanted to read it, not because a teacher put it in front of me. You know what I mean? Is there a book, and obviously that's a book that comes up on many banned lists for lots of reasons. Is there a book in your lives that fits that description?
Huck Finn.
Huck Finn. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's obviously been a matter of controversy because of the language in it. On the other hand, it is one of the most subversive books ever written against racism. And so the idea that it could be banned and has been the target of, on the ALA list for years, of one of the more banned books, that to me is shocking.
Anybody else want to speak to this? Books that have been banned that are important to them?
I hope that this is, when I say this, something that everyone in the audience knows. The Who Is series, who is Barack Obama, who is Michelle Obama? Those books have been banned, and that's scary. Yes, so those books have been banned.
And those books, just for people to know, are like very sort of like, almost like kid Wikipedia entries.
Yes.
You know, and I mean that in the best way possible. Just like, let me explain who this famous person is to you.
Yeah.
And generally aren't even like, in my reading of them, not everything's political, but aren't politicized in any real way that I would say. Yeah, wow.
On my own, I read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I don't remember how old I was. My grandmother, it was in her house, and I just kind of pulled it off the shelf. And I didn't eat like canned food for a really long time because I was like, wow, that's really gross. You could have this much insects in a can of peas. But it also was more illuminating for me about the reality of factory life, child labor, all of those sorts of things than anything I ever learned in history. And I'm not Gen Z, and I don't remember much about some of my history classes because I checked out of them, right? Because they were so unrelevant and uninspiring and disconnected. But in 9th grade, we also read The Bluest Eye. It was part of our curriculum. I read The Fire Next Time in a class in high school. And in 7th grade, Things Fall Apart. So there were some things in my education that exposed me to myself a little bit earlier, but not enough.
Yes. Jill, is there a book that resonates with you?
Actually, my daughter in in prepping to come here, and we were talking about banned books, and she kind of took it upon herself to read a lot of lists of books. And I think there's a number of books that she's almost, which is unfortunate, used to hearing are banned. But there was a book on there, it's called George. It's an LGBTQ plus book. It's fairly newer. And somebody just shouted out the author. Thank you. And it's a wonderful book. And she just fell in love with that book. And I think she had just a very, very visceral reaction, like emotional reaction to the fact that that was banned. She kind of, I think it was like a first awakening for her, realizing this isn't an old issue, and it just hit home for her. And so it opened up a lot of conversations. But anyway, and yes, the Who It series.
Yeah. We're opening up to Q&A, so I think, is it the QR code where people, it's not working, great. Perfect. I guess we're opening up to Q&A, and how do we run this? Okay. So if you have put your hand up if you have a cue that you would like to be aid. Somebody will come around to you with the microphone. Any hand ups anywhere? I can't see. Everybody's questions have been answered.
Jill, I'm curious, how old is your daughter? If you don't mind answering, it may be too personal, I don't know, but, and how does George rate on common sense as it relates to the age group that your daughter is?
My kids, both my daughters, are 11 and 14, and how dare you make me know the age that I rated that book? But I couldn't we have 40,000 reviews, but I will look it up for you. But she read it. Most things that my kids read, we at Common Sense rate older. So I am in the camp of I aged down a little bit. And sometimes, depending on what we're watching, a lot of it. But I think, there's concepts in books or movies or TV that are developmentally kids may or may not be ready for. So that's the whole point, is like, now you know where your kid's at, so are they ready for something? My daughter isn't also asking me all the time of what she's going to read, but she will talk to me about what she's reading, which is great. It's rated for 10-year-olds. Oh, thank you. And it's also now called Melissa. Yes, thank you.
So the book is rated for 10-year-olds, and the book's now entitled Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi.
Question over here. How do local ordinances that purport to protect citizens from lewd and additional that type of content affect libraries and book bans?
Actually, they tried to adopt that kind of ordinance in Arkansas, and so far it's been enjoined. But the question is about having ordinances that regulate the availability of lewd books. And
is lascivious the word that we're...
Lewd,
okay.
lewd and lascivious, yes, one of my favorite words. It ties into a larger question in constitutional law, materials that are classified as harmful to minors. And in constitutional law, it's basically borderline obscenity, is what that covers. And in these latest wars over book censorship, that concept has been expanded to a very broad concept, that anything that someone may find, quote, inappropriate, which is a word that you find in a lot of these efforts as well. It is not a legal category. It's not a concept that can be applied with any kind of precision. And that's one of the reasons why in the courts, a lot of these efforts so far have been enjoined or blocked from going into effect. And it's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about being able to fight against those kinds of regulations in the future.
So inappropriate is not a legal statute?
No, it's not.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, this is more like a comment, kind of a question. You can answer it if you want to, but I'm not for banned books, but hasn't the banned book, being that books have been banned, brought exposure to a lot of books that need to be read? So it's like, how do you use the opposite to attract? This is kind of like what it has done, was attracted us to go read the book. Because people do, I'm trying to get my book banned now, just let y'all know. But dead serious, it's how did this like bring about an awareness for us to go chase a book down and make the world do it?
Yeah, I have to admit, I have looked on the banned book list to see if my book was on there and been like, oh man, because it's not on there. So I understand where he's coming from. It's like, I mean, back in the day, I'm Gen X, which is anyway. And it was with record albums. The parental advisory label was the thing they realized was attracting people to albums, not repelling people from albums. So yes.
It's a story as old as time. Those kinds of prohibitions or warnings are always taken as catnip for people who want to get those books. It goes back to the 1870s when Anthony Comstock was stalking the country and being the arbiter between what was moral and what wasn't, and he could enforce the law personally. And he tells the story in his 1880 book, Traps for the Young, where he says that a young actress came to him and she was trying to promote a novel, and she asked him if he might attack it just a little bit so that she could get attention and people would buy the book. And you know, it's been the same, the Banned in Boston scenario. That's one of the things that makes me optimistic, that banning books makes people realize that books can be cool, or if not that, dangerous, and for that reason they should be read.
Any other thoughts on the ban doing the opposite thing, or is that helpful in some way? All right. Any other question?
Yeah. So I'm the head of collections here at DC Public Library, and I'm sharing that because for this question, lots of the requests that I get to remove material comes not from people who want books around. It comes from the left, right? People who are like, that book is offensive to me, it's offensive in this way, and so forth and so on. And what I wonder is if these kinds of sessions where we're all on the same side, we all agree with the same thing, but it's not challenging, is it more useful for us to be standing up and challenging people who are kind of on our own side and calling that out?
That's really an excellent point. And it's one of the reasons that concerns me when I see books like To Kill a Mockingbird, that was 7th on the ALA list of challenged books, and it was challenged for racial slurs and white saviorhood. Now, say what you will about the book, you can like it, you can not like it, but it shouldn't be on a list of challenged books. And the same is true in book acquisition policies, and that's why I thought the ALA Bill of Rights was so important, because it talks about the mission of libraries to provide resources for all segments of the population, people you agree with, people you disagree with, doesn't matter. And if you look at some of the recent patterns in book acquisitions, you'll find a lot more voices, you can call them on the right or not, but voices that are not being picked up for library acquisitions. I brought a few visual aids, 2 of which were books I defended from censorship, but a third one is a book called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier. And even though it is criticized as being anti-trans, and you can make whatever judgment about that you want, the fact is it is not being stocked by librarians across the country because of criticisms like that. Again, make your own judgment about the book, but libraries should be for everybody.
Absolutely.
I think that in order for us to be considered non-biased is that we have to know both sides of the story, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Uncomfortability allows us to learn. Why is it uncomfortable? Why do I feel this way? We need to be able to open ourselves up to ideas other than our own. That is how we become fully knowledgeable and non-biased. And I believe that's really important. So books can be offensive to people if they have certain topics that are uncomfortable to them, but we have to be able to critically think that through and not always feel so emotional about things, and be able to think about it, know why it's uncomfortable, and just think through it. It's okay to feel emotions. Talk to somebody about your emotions. But we can't ban books because we feel a certain way about it. We need to be able to have all aspects of the story. And books, literature, they tell a story.
Oh, it's still on. You left it on the last time. There is no monolith in any movement, right? The left is not a single left. There's so many different sort of social political thoughts, histories, experiences that show up across the continuum that I think we have to have these conversations. I'm part of a desegregation task force in New Jersey. A ruling just came down in 2023, a group of plaintiffs and school districts, et cetera, et cetera. But, we're all on this call, and there is no uniformity of thought around desegregation, what it should look like, whether or not it's good. We just know that we need better opportunities for Black and Latino kids in New Jersey, right? And so it is important for us all to be in this space together, focused on the same issue, but even understanding where we're intersecting, where we're differentiating, and where we're not aligned, so that we can have an effective movement that does lead to some of the outcomes that we hope to see for the kids that we're advocating for.
Jill, do you have any thoughts on this? Okay. So we have a few minutes before we go. I just want to speak to the fact that being someone I live in Oakland, California. I've lived in Berkeley. To me, it's the idea that there is a left and a right when I live in Berkeley, and it's like those people will fight about compost. You know what I mean? Like so, like you're not composting enough of your compost. So to me, I think we have to really get out of this binary of like there are these two sides when there is, like you just said, there's political disagreement on the left, and certainly, yeah. So I always like to end with giving people homework. Is there something you would like to tell the audience, the people watching out online, what you would like them to do now that we've had this conversation? Start with you, Bob.
Get active in the issue. And when you see someone advocating the censorship of books, get out there and put your voice in the mix as well and advocate against censorship. Or if they're successful in having books removed from a school library or a public library, make sure those books are available in your community one way or another. Add your voice to the debate and make sure that it isn't just one-sided shouting match of people trying to shout down the publishers and the authors.
I'd say use your voice for good. If you see an issue, say something about it, do something about it. You may not be the only one thinking it. You may be the only one who says it, but you're probably not the only one who's thinking it. And Gen Z, lock in and vote in November.
Well, everyone vote in November, all of us. See the connections, look for them, because we're having this conversation, but it's not an isolated event or instance or strain. It is really, really tightly wound up with some other things that are going on around us.
Spoken like a true educator. I would just echo everything that was said here. And while I do agree, like, get out and take action, I also think it starts in the home. And so encourage your kids or yourselves, pick up books that you didn't read back in the day and start reading them now and get a sense of why things are being challenged and bring those conversations to the table with your own family.
Give our panel a round of applause, everybody. Bob, Christina, Lauren, and Jill, thank you. Thank you very much.
So everyone, it is 2:58. We're going to take a 12-minute break. We'll be back. Please be back at your seats at 3:10. Thank you.
Hi, I'm U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. So grateful that you're holding this event. The name of your symposium says it all: Shelved Voices. Books and book bans do impact everyone, everywhere. As a lifelong educator, I've seen how books can shape the lives of students of all ages. I believe in the wise words of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. Books are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Books can reflect our own experience back to us in ways that help us feel less alone. They can transport us to worlds different than our own, and they can help us learn about and build empathy for other identities and experiences. More than 4 million students have had their readings censored through book bans. Most of these bans are cynical. They're hateful efforts to censor stories of and by people of color or LGBTQ Americans. This serves to prevent students from learning about history, arts, culture, and contributions of marginalized communities. As a father, I can't imagine being a parent whose kid never read a single book in school about people who look like us. Make no mistake, these bans are nothing short of an attempt to erase American history in all of its complexity. No one who seeks to ban books can claim to represent the freedom we hold dear as Americans. Here's what I know to be true. Educators and parents don't want politicians dictating what their kids can learn, think, or believe. And I'm so heartened by students like Ida Gupta. When Ida's school district in Pennsylvania tried to ban more than 300 books like Ven a mi casa by Dr. Seuss and biographies of leaders like Rosa Parks, Ida and her friends, they spoke out. They protested. And eventually, their school reversed the ban. Ida has been on national news. She won awards from the King Center and gave a TEDx talk about this journey that I know has inspired me and so many others. She also is the co-author with Christina Ellis of a forthcoming book called Fighting Censorship, a handbook for pushing back on book bans. I feel an immense sense of hope and optimism when I look to the next generation and young people like Ida. It's my pleasure and my honor to introduce her today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Today, I'm just going to speak on some of my experiences in experiencing book bans as a student in York, PA. I never related to any of my peers growing up. My family was Hindu. I was Indian American. I grew up vegetarian. I was different, not normal, and did not fit in. My peers would complain the Indian food my mom would pack for me at lunch smelled bad, and I heard someone or the other mocking Indian accents in the hallway every day. Kids would shout, "Go back to your country," from the bus window every week, and I would take it. I was socialized to be extremely ashamed of my cultural heritage and identity. My survival tactic was assimilation at the cost of my personhood. In my 13 years of schooling, there was not a singular book that was ever read to me in read aloud or that I had signed out from the library that highlighted a South Asian protagonist. If I did not see myself, how could I possibly love myself? Without sufficient representation, neither had my peers learned to see the beauty in diversity, nor had I learned to love myself. Their aversion to me and my aversion to myself was rooted in one thing: a lack of representation. So when I found out in August 2021 that the Central York School District had decided to ban over 300 diversity resources spanning from elementary to high school level education, it felt like a slap in the face. The schooling that had already accounted for my fear for even stepping outside of my house in my cultural clothing had now made the decision that would lead children of color to be at odds with their identity for generations to come. Resources from this list included Dr. Seuss books like Who is Sonia Sotomayor and Who is Rosa Parks? Books on a Black girl's journey in loving her hair or a Muslim girl making friends at school were all banned. My moral conscience could not and would not allow me to let this happen. I had to be the representation that I never saw. So we had our first school-wide blackout where students against the ban wore black to show their support for our cause. After that, we started peacefully protesting outside the school every day before school for 2 weeks. By day 14, we had 30 to 40 people consistently coming to protest outside the high school as buses came in. These 2 weeks consisted of late nights at school board meetings, many interviews with local and national news stations, and continuous social media advocacy. We received overwhelming supports for our efforts from the Central York community, and eventually the ban was reversed. Every day, I am grateful for my decision to share my story. Advocacy is a pillar of our democracy, and as a student and a citizen, I feel a moral obligation to protect democracy where it's being threatened, through efforts like censorship and banning throughout this country. What happened at my school is not an isolated event. To students, use your voice and believe in the power of your narrative. Speak up and stand up to these evils. Trust yourself and know that you do have the power to catalyze long-lasting change. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. I think in that first just incredible panel, we got to explore the problem, some of the challenges. We got some historical context. Dr. Martin Luther King wrote a book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And I feel like our job today, folks, is to chart that course. Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? So what I'd like to do by way of introducing my fabulous panelists is by asking you to do what I'm about to do. Share a personal experience about book banning and how it has impacted you and what you did about it. Or perhaps, in my case, what I wished I had done. I got an email from a librarian in the great state of Wisconsin, and she said, Mr. Alexander, your book, An American Story, has been banned in my district. If there's anything you can say to us or offer to help us, we'd appreciate it. So I immediately tracked her phone number down and I called her. And I said, this is Kwame Alexander. And after she started screaming, she was like, here's what happened. She works in an elementary school. We had all the first graders come in, Mr. Alexander, and we let them choose any book they wanted to take home. There's a little girl who happened to be white, and her father's in the military, so she always chooses books with flags on them. Anybody have an American Story in here? Can you hold it up? Y'all can look, there it is right there. She always chooses books with flags on them. So she chose your book, Mr. Alexander, and she was so excited, and she couldn't wait to take it home and show it to her family. And so she took it home, and the next day she came back, and she had it, and she had a frown on her face, and she said, I don't need this book anymore. And the librarian asked her why, and she said, well, it's not a good book. No, actually, she said it's a bad book. And first of all, my literary ego was a little hurt. What you mean, the illustrations? And the librarian said, no, it's not that it's a bad book. Maybe it's just not for you. And she said, no, my mommy said it's a bad book because it makes white people feel bad about themselves. So she took the book back, and later that day, the mother came up to the school and met with the principal. And without any sort of hearing or anything, Amanda, the book got pulled from all the shelves, and not just in that school, but in that district, without any sort of hearing. So I, of course, then asked, well, can I have the number to the mother? Right? Because we got to do something about this. So let me take the first step. So she said, well, let me see if I can get some contact information for you, but let me let you know this. The mother and the father, have 9 kids, and 4 of them are biological, and the other 5 are adopted, and these other 5 kids are black. An American Story is about a teacher who's trying to learn how to teach slavery, and she doesn't know how to do it. And so at that point, I made a decision that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to go to this community. I want to meet with this parent because I felt like, Kamal, I had the charm, I had the sort of wherewithal to connect with her because I don't want my kid watching Bridgerton, but I'm not going to tell you that your kid shouldn't be watching Bridgerton, but I really wanted to talk to this parent. And so I wished my solution was to go and have a conversation because I felt like it would have been productive and I just didn't get to do it. So that's what I would have wanted to do. And I wished I had done it, and maybe it's not too late. I'd like to know from you, Carissa, what's a personal experience you've had and what would you do about it?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for me, also, I'm Carissa, I'm with the Texas Freedom Network, so I do statewide work in Texas. And the first thing that comes to mind is not necessarily book banning specifically, but censorship. It was really my gateway to the work that I do. I transferred from community college to the University of Texas in Austin and knew I wanted to get politically engaged, but didn't know where to start because I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas. My parents, progressive but not really political, and didn't know how to harness the do-gooder justice side of me. And I went to a meeting and they were talking about advocating for comprehensive sex ed in Texas because Texas doesn't require sex ed in classrooms. In fact, we're banning lots of books that talk about sexuality, LGBTQ inclusion, all sorts of things. And so it doesn't, even if school districts do teach sex ed, it's not required to be medically accurate. So you can imagine all kinds of doors that opens in the Bible Belt. And so, I knew that I grew up in a family and in a school district that thankfully it could have been worse. We just didn't talk about it, right? Which I think is pretty common. It wasn't shameful, but we just acted like it didn't exist. And I know going to college and becoming a young adult, how much more well-equipped I would have been if I would have been equipped with that knowledge. And so that was really how I got started in advocacy, was advocating for comprehensive sex ed, advocating to talk about reproductive rights, advocating for LGBTQ inclusion in that space. And it's still a fight that we are working on. It's still something that needs a lot of work in Texas. But that is a huge part of my origin story as a person who now runs a large organization who does this work in Texas.
Tiffany Jewell, you wrote a book that was the #1 New York Times best-selling book. It was called This Book is Anti-Racist, and you wrote it or it was published arguably during sort of the origin of this whole modern book banning movement. Tell us about a personal experience you've had and what you did about it.
So the book came out in January 2020. Remember that? That was like, I remember doing a little book tour, and like the first, like, we saw like COVID came to Seattle, and I was like, oh, okay. So then we're all at home, May 2020, we witnessed the state-sanctioned murder of George Floyd. Everyone starts buying all of the books with anti-racism in the title. Like, they were back-ordered. I was getting emails like, I can't find your book, where is it? I was like, I don't know. And then kind of what happened is people read the books. And then they passed them on. And other people started reading the books, and kids started reading the books, and adults, because we live in a country, the United States is like the only country that has not signed the United Nations Conventions for the Right of the Child. Think about why. So we have all these adults being like, whoa, I don't want my kid to have this knowledge that I don't know how to handle, that I'm afraid of, that I'm just like uncertain of. So then I started getting all these Google alerts. And they were like, your book is banned, basically like your book's banned here and it's banned here and it's being challenged here, and getting all these emails. And I was like, I don't understand what is happening. And I do have to say, too, when books get banned, it's not a great thing. Like, you might get on a list somewhere and somebody somewhere who has access to resources to purchase it or read it can read it. But really what's happening is many people are not having any access to that. And so I see it in my checks from my publisher, my royalties, which are not, like, royalties are that's a whole different thing. But like, they have gone down because schools have stopped buying the books. Bookstores have stopped stocking them. They're not being, it's not being as widely used. And so the books get banned first, and then they start banning the authors. And so I do a lot of virtual events. I love virtual events. I think they are really accessible, especially for schools that don't have funds to like fly me out and bring me in person. And so I did an event with a bunch of independent schools in, I think it was Toronto. And the event was with the students, and it was amazing, and they had so many amazing questions. And then the next day, I was scheduled to do an event with the caregivers. And then I got a call from my agent, and they were like, they don't like what you posted on social media. And so this was a couple years ago. I am very clear on my stances on things. I'm anti-war, I'm anti-oppression, I am all for community and investing in community and divesting from things that harm communities. And the organization was like, we just want you to take down your post where I had divest from police, invest in community, free Palestine. They wanted me to take the post down. And I was like, I'm not gonna do that. You know who you're getting. I am very clear. And they were like, well, we have some caregivers who are uncomfortable with you speaking. I was like, I already spoke to the kids. You're a little late. But they ended up canceling the event. My agent's amazing, and she was like, you are still getting paid for that. And so what I did, because I was very vocal about it on social media, what was happening, I didn't name the school district. But what I did, and I'm take that, is I redistributed the funds that they gave me to organizations for the very things that they wanted me to, say. And that felt like, oh, take that. But also, that stinks, because most of the caregivers wanted to have a time to be engaged with the person who spent time with their children, who their children were excited for. And this is what's happening with book bans, and we'll talk more about it, that few, very vocal few who think they're gonna talk for and speak for everybody, let's not let them get their way.
So your book was banned, and then...
My book was not banned in that district.
It was not, no, but I'm saying in general, that first book, you got those Google alerts. And your sort of fight back was to then go on and write more books on the same topic.
I mean,
do you feel like that is you have a responsibility to continue fighting by using or lifting your voice on the
So,
page?
I always, like Dr. Jamila Elias Scott, who's an amazing scholar based out of UMass Amherst, she has in her book, Black Appetite, White Food, like basically know what it is you're fighting for, so you're not exhausting yourself fighting against something. I know who I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for children. I'm fighting for Black children. I'm fighting for brown children. I'm fighting for children to have access to all the things that I didn't have access to as a kid.
Got it.
And so writing these books is like my way of like, I'm an educator, but in my class, like I could have a classroom of 16 or with books. Now I have like a global endless classroom.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Antonio, before you sort of tell us your experience and talk about what you're doing, is there any truth to this notion that we heard, I think, in one of the questions, that when your book gets banned, people are buying more of your books? Because Tiffany just said, no, her royalty reports don't reflect that. What is happening, because you work for Levine Carrito, one of the most prominent and storied modern publishers of inclusive, diverse literature. What's that experience been like?
It's complicated because, yes, maybe there could be a small spike or something, or maybe for like a week or something you hit a bestseller list because a certain small group of people bought a bunch of books. But what really happens is what you're saying, Tiffany. Like, people become scared, they become afraid. And so I was saying this earlier, like librarians don't want to be put into a conflict position that they don't necessarily have to. I think it's actually almost like a human nature thing. Like, unless we have to fight, I don't know if we need to like start a fight, And so people they don't want to be called groomers. They don't want to be labeled woke. They don't want to be called social justice warriors because that could put their job at risk. It could put their ability to continue working at risk, and it can put their reputation on the line for down the line. So I think what happens a lot is that fear causes a lot of folks, gatekeepers primarily, people that are best booksellers, librarians, educators, people that purchase books, to pay more attention to books that in their minds are gonna make their job a little easier.
That's a natural sort of human condition.
That's what I think. But it also means that you're now not complicit, but you now have been bullied into a different way of being.
Right.
And it's like and I get it. I get the psychology of it because it takes a lot of effort to be the one person at a school that's like, no, I think we can say equity, we can say inclusion, we can say diversity. It's really hard to be that person if you're the lone voice.
So as a publisher, do you feel like you're directly involved in the fight against book banning in the work that you all are publishing?
Yes, I think we are active, just the mission, the company existing in itself is already a stance against censorship, or because we're publishing people that didn't used to get book contracts. And then in 2020, everybody was getting a book contract, and now it's 2024, and they're like, you know what?
They don't want to market us.
Yeah. They're like, let's go to some fantasy, otherworld, whatever, kind of different thing. So we exist for those stories that didn't have a voice and continue to not have a voice, despite what the pendulum swinging in a very great direction in 2020. Marginalized writers, the whole alphabet, LGBTQ, AAPI, Latine, everything. These are the voices that we're bringing to the forefront, and we're doing. I feel like I'm doing my job because, not to brag, but we have 3 Newberries, and we've only been around for 5 years. You know what I mean? We are at every single
Y'all can clap for the 3 Newberries.
It just shows you that those voices that were not getting deals, that Arthur couldn't get those deals at his previous publisher, those voices have found audiences and people want to read them.
Okay, so how do you sleep at night, Antonio? Like, how do you deal with like, you obviously are dealing with the stress, Tiffany, of this. You're advocating on a regular basis, Carissa, in your job. And so there's gotta be fear. And I would imagine that there's no one on this stage who has not dealt as directly with the daily fear that we're talking about. Because as Antonio talked about, the gatekeepers as Amanda. And so, Amanda, you are a librarian in the field. You are doing this work. I mean, we saw you on CNN on the cover of School Librarian Journal. You're School Librarian of the Year in 2021. And so the question is, what was your experience? Give us that experience. What you did about it. Tell us about that journey, and talk about the fear. How did you get to that point where I'm going to deal with this?
Well, let me start by telling what happened to me so you'll understand where I'm going with this. So I'm a school librarian by trade, 24-year educator, and I live in, thank you, educator. I live in a very small town in Louisiana, and it's the same town I grew up in. I've lived there my whole life. We have 2 red lights, we're very small. And I went and spoke at the public library as a resident of my community because books were going to be censored and voices were going to be silenced. And what happened was that I learned that, no, it's not fun to be the lone person. That I wasn't the lone person that night, but after I went and spoke, there was a targeted smear campaign against me and my reputation. They were very clear. They were trying to ruin my reputation in my very small town. I mean, they openly posted that. And I spent several days crying. You know, awful memes were made about me, awful names. I've received death threats, and it's not fun. But I once heard author Samira Ahmed say, you should use your power and privilege for purpose. And I do have privilege. I'm a straight, white, cisgender woman, and I think the only person with more power than me would be my male counterpart. And in my community, when I say that, I'm mocked, but it's true. And I feel like, having won some awards and having a very supportive family, I was in a position that I could speak out, but it's not fun. And I can't go grocery shopping in my small town. I get followed around and called names. I need to be slapped, killed, fired. God's going to wrap a millstone around my neck and drown me. And so, no, that's not fun. But what I did about it, because I did cry for like a solid week. I just cried, and oh, woe is me. But then I got mad, and I got mad. And I heard George M. Johnson once say, like, I didn't choose this fight chose me. And I didn't go out to, I've always championed diverse literature and books, but it put me in the spotlight, so I thought, well, I'm going to use this. So what I did was, first I founded Livingston Parish Library Alliance, which is an alliance of citizens in my community to fight for our public library.
And did you tell us the state?
Louisiana, yes. And so we have successfully, the coalition I've built within my own parish, because we're parishes, not counties in Louisiana, we have not seen one book banned so far, 2 years. We fought, but then what I decided that's not enough. So I went, 2 other friends of mine, we founded Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship. And we help, because there's an extremist group in Louisiana that's targeting libraries across the state. And so we founded this organization. It's a nonprofit. And we help other parishes that are being attacked learn how to deal with it, like the toolkits, the advice, building their own alliances. But we thought, okay, that's not enough. So then we had 9 anti-library bills in Louisiana legislature this past legislative session. we built a coalition that, if you're not familiar with Louisiana, we have a very extremist supermajority in the Senate and our House of Representatives, and we have a dictator governor. And we successfully defeated, by building coalitions and partnering with all sorts of nonprofits, people from all walks of life. We sent collectively 44,000 emails to the legislature, and we defeated 7.5. I say half because the 8th bill, we put so many amendments on it that it's like obsolete. Defeated pretty much 8 anti-library, anti-book bills in Louisiana. So I'm really proud of that. And it's not me. Like, I mean, it's a coalition of us, but I'm very proud to be a part of it. And I also thought, well, I can help other people. I can help my parents. I don't want to get too much into politics, but my parents tend to be with the crowd that bans books and has extremist views. And I wanted to write a book for people of all walks of life to understand how libraries work. And so I wrote a book that told my story, but it also, I'm hoping, will be for everyday citizens from all walks of life to understand how libraries work and why books are so important, and the fact that books can save lives. And then there's a toolkit at the end of the book on how you can help in your own communities.
So Tiffany's writing the books. Antonio is publishing the books. Amanda is ensuring that the books are accessible. What happens in a state like Texas, where we all know they are the #1 state in terms of books that have been banned or censored? What is that responsibility that your organization has taken up? And then I want you to follow that up with, Texas can't be all that bad. Like, tell us what's happening that makes us feel like, okay, we may want to go to the beach in Galveston. Like, give us a reason to want to go to Texas.
Go to South Padre, not Galveston, first of all. It's a nicer beach. Yeah, I mean, it is a huge, overwhelming responsibility. And I also want to caveat that with, part of the reason is because Texas has about 1,200 school districts. The sheer size of the state, we have 254 counties, 1,200-ish school districts. And so the size of it makes it really overwhelming, and meaning that there are fights everywhere. We also, though, work very closely in coalition with our partners. We were founded almost 30 years ago by Cecile Richards around education advocacy at the State Board of Education. We have expanded that to include a lot of different issue areas, but we're still fighting a lot of similar fights in Texas at all levels. At the State Board of Education, which is an elected 15-member body that decides what the curriculum standards are and what textbooks are used in public schools, which has an influence on what the rest of the country does because of the size of the market in Texas. We also are seeing at the statewide level, at the legislature, we also have a dictator governor and lieutenant governor and attorney general. And they are also putting pressure on school districts, on public universities. And so there's a lot. There's a lot popping up, and we want to do it all. We can't, but we do as much as we can in partnership with, ACLU of Texas, Equality Texas, so many other. We have a Teach the Truth coalition of organizations that work together. And then we also see so much homegrown advocacy. One, by young people on college campuses, right, that are fighting back so hard against these DEI bans on the universities. Fighting for folks that are laid off, fighting for inclusive spaces, fighting for DEI programs, fighting for GSAs. Really, and it is very easy to get burned out in this work, especially in a state like Texas, where this part of the strategy is also to throw everything at us so that we do get burned out and we stop fighting. But we know that's the strategy. And so the moments of inspiration come from seeing people in their communities doing this really amazing work. Round Rock, Texas is a suburb of Austin, where I live in Austin. The Round Rock Black Parents Association they founded up there, which is they were attempting to ban books, and some parents who had kids in the school district said no, and they rallied together. They formed this local organization to fight for their kids, to fight for inclusion, to fight for their kids to be seen in the education that they are getting in their public schools. And it's we are there to support this work. We lead some of this work, but we also in Galveston there is an effort the state of Texas also passed a bill that allowed school districts to replace school counselors with chaplains. Another tool that we use, though, is that school districts are so severely underfunded that they're listening less and less to orders from the governor. So they're getting really, really angry, rightfully so, because they are seeing even folks who historically don't do a lot of public education advocacy, they're seeing their schools fall apart. And they are getting really angry, and they are recognizing that, politics does not belong in the classroom. And we have so much rich, diverse history in Texas. Our communities are diverse. Our neighbors are diverse. There's so much Southern hospitality in Texas, and parents and students are fighting back in their own communities. And when they're successful, or even when they are just using that opportunity to learn and start their advocacy journey that will inform them for the rest of their lives, it's just amazing to watch.
Amanda, has your job ever been in jeopardy? Or do you know librarians, educators in Louisiana whose jobs have been in jeopardy because they've resisted, rebelled, fought back against this ridiculous notion, as I see it? And what have been some of the sort of things that they've had to do?
Fortunately for me, I had built up such a reputation in my community of getting grants for my school and winning awards. And because of my situation, personally, I was speaking at the public library and not at the school board, exercising my First Amendment rights as a citizen. They didn't want that smoke, but not a day goes by that someone doesn't call and demand for me to be fired. They did last week. So I'm always fearful that I'm going to be fired. But as my boss says, well, you've done nothing wrong. But I do know, I know people in Louisiana who were placed back in the classroom because librarians are that's the best job in the world to me. And a lot of people fight to get into those positions. I know librarians that have been put back in the classroom. You're no longer needed in the library for their stances. Not just in Louisiana. I can name at least one school librarian in almost every state that has happened to. And one example was a friend of mine in Florida. She posted that her school district had her removed. She's a high school librarian. And her school district made her take off 90 or 100 books off the shelves. And she posted on social media, or someone else posted a picture of the books. It wasn't even her. And 2 weeks later, Governor DeSantis was giving a press conference at her school, and the next day she was asked to go back to the classroom. So, I mean, you can say it's just a coincidence, but that's happening all over. You look at there's a teacher in Oklahoma that just had her teacher's certificate, her license removed for giving the QR code to the Brooklyn Library or the New York Public Library, and it's real. People are getting fired they're getting demoted. And it's very scary, because, like I said, I do have privilege, but I know a lot of single librarians that can't afford to lose their jobs. And I'm fortunate that I have, I'm not too worried, but a lot of people are, and it's not an unfounded fear.
Yeah, this work of fighting oppression and racism and book banning and all these tentacles that we're sort of talking about and the ones that we're not talking about, to fight back, it requires a certain level of fearlessness. I'll often say, Tiffany, if you want to know how to resist injustice, you have to look no further than the history of Black people in America. Like, we are a template for what needs to be done. But I'm not sure, especially as it relates to schools, that we're asking the right questions. And so my question to you, Tiffany, is, why can't we trust the kids? That's my first part of my question.
Why can't we? That's my question to everybody, because we absolutely can and we need to. Who I am now, who my children are now, is very different from who I was as a child. My access to materials was different, like just all of these things. Kids right now have a lot more access to information, and very quickly. And they are more aware because of that. And so, like, one of the examples that I'm thinking of is in our district, just like school started, and on the for day before school, our superintendent had a mandatory training for teachers. And it was one that the students were like, this is not what we want our teachers to learn about us. And nobody is asking kids, what do you need from me? Which is such a simple question, right? What do you need from me? And students learners, our own children might say, can I have some money, right? My son is always like, can I have some money? I want a new pair of Jordans. But I'm like, no, you can't. But really, when I go to schools, kids are like, can you help us talk to the mayor? Can you help us talk to the principal? Can you just let people know that we want to go to the bathroom when we need to go to the bathroom, and not in the 3 minutes between classrooms? We want so I don't know why people can't trust kids. I trust them more than I trust myself sometimes. But we need to know that children know what they need. And we can also, if we're not sure of that, we can ask them, are you sure? Or can you tell me more about that? And just do some exploration with them.
Antonio, the books that you all are publishing, are you taking that into consideration? Are you asking the children, metaphorically? How are you deciding what to publish and what sort of needs to be out to help with their imagination building?
Well, I mean, it's a tough question. I mean, obviously, I think Arthur would resist any form of someone telling him what to do. But I think the way we do it is by bringing in these authors, so that their voice can be heard. We publish books, people talk about intersectionality all the time, and I'm like, okay, just go to our website. Every single one of those titles is probably by an intersectional author or dealing with intersectional issues about class, about race, about ability, about identity, about, so that's one way we do it, is that we just give the microphone to the author and just say, hey, why don't you speak up here? We have this platform. Get up on stage and say something.
So look, take us home, Amanda, because we have looked at the kind of work that is necessary to fight back, to protest, to resist. And it requires Langston Hughes said it best, I've been scarred and battered My hopes the wind done shattered. Snow has frizzed me. Sun has baked me. I think between them, they done tried to make me stop laughing, stop loving, stop living. But I don't care. I'm still here. And we still need to be here, but we've got to be fearless. And so leave us with an understanding of what this sort of multifaceted attack on education and libraries really is. What are the pieces of that attack that we all need to understand as we go out into this world and remain and try to be fearless?
So I recently created, I call it the roadmap on the attacks on our libraries and the books. And it's really an attack on the nation. It's an attack on the entire country. And it starts off with, usually, from what I'm seeing in the hundreds of librarians I talk to across the nation, it starts with someone takes one page out of a book out of context and says this is, and it's usually a book meant for teens or adults, and they say this is in the children's section next to green eggs and ham, and it's not. People get whipped into a frenzy. So the road then travels to politicians who pick up the mantle of, we've got to save the children, and they swoop in to save us from problems that don't exist. And then it goes into, we see they're using this to pander for votes, and it goes into the overtaking of school boards and library boards and city councils and legislatures across the country. Then it goes into the legislation, where the legislation is where they're trying to imprison librarians for providing access to books. They're going after booksellers in some states, Texas, sorry. They're attacking people and their stories, and they're trying to other, and they're trying to marginalize. But there's also another goal there, because the ultimate goal is, control. There's the money and power. And so they're pushing for eventually privatized schools and privatized libraries. And they're not very secretive about it. My own U.S. representative publicly stated on Twitter that the goal was to have church-run libraries where they can control the stories. And if you look at what stories, it's Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism, and because there's a fear of losing power from people who have historically been in power. But I'll leave you with this, that it's very important to stand up to these agendas. It's important to stand up for the authors, the students, the kids, the communities that are being, that are trying to be erased, the stories that are trying to be erased. And you have to speak out. So you said a poem, so I'm going to tell you a poem, the last stanza of a poem, Invictus by William Ernest Henley. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I'm the captain of my fate, the master of my soul. And I will not be complicit to the eradication and the othering and the erasing of stories to the kids who need it the most.
So you have a model with these four brilliant activists to be inspired by, literally, figuratively, however you decide. These are your templates. These are templates. We're going to move into the questions right now, and we've got a few questions for you all. You all okay? Y'all still here? Good. Y'all ready to work? Yes. Because they can't do it by themselves. My question is, what do you all believe is the single most important thing for us to do? No, we're going to answer that question last.
He set us up.
Yeah. So you got time to think about it, right?
Yeah.
All the questions are really the same. People want to know what to do, you know?
Yeah.
What is the role of non-government institutions, think tanks like Aspen? What is their role in this fight? Carissa?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, that is what my organization does, right? The Texas Freedom Network. And we were founded, again, to do policy and advocacy work around public education. And our role, we see our role at TFN to raise awareness and education so people know what is happening in their school districts, at the State Board of Education, at the legislature. I'm going to talk specifically about the SBOE because that is like one of our big bread and butter. But that body specifically they're elected positions. Their districts are the largest single-member districts in the state. They are larger than congressional districts, and it's not a paid position. They have no staff. And it's at the top of the ticket on the ballot. And they're partisan elections with districts that are also very gerrymandered. And so our job is to make sure that the public knows what decisions they are making, to fight back against those decisions, so that way they are not dictating they are not dictating what students learn in public schools without accountability. There's a quote from the Gablers were a couple back in like the 60s who are kind of like the parents of censorship. And they used to say, figure out what you want kids to believe and then teach history to reflect that. And that is what we are up against. And we also see our job at TFN as we're not the ones who are dictating what should be in, what books students should read, what should be in the curriculum standards, what textbooks. We look to the experts. We look to librarians to run their libraries. We look to academics to decide, what students should be learning in their history classes, right? Because that is the role of a think tank. That is the role of an advocacy organization, is to point to people who have the expertise to be guiding those decisions, and then making sure that those decisions are made in a transparent way where people have a voice, the community has a voice in that process. And so that is what we are attempting to do.
If anyone has a question out here that they didn't do the QR code, think about it because I'll call on you next. We're winding this down. Antonio, tell us one of the books that Levine Carrito published that you think we should all read.
Oh, well, there's some out there actually.
We just want one, Antonio.
Well,
and yes, all the books are outside for sale. Excellent, thank you.
To your point about people want to know what they can do. Well, that's one thing that you can do right now is that you can literally buy one of those books, and even if you don't take it home, it gets donated to an organization that will give books to. Describe to me how it is again. They give them books to organizations that.
Yeah, so they have donated books to us for us to give to the community and distribute. We hosted a read-in at the Capitol during the legislative session where we had families and students reading inside the dome, and that's the kind of thing that we're doing with those books.
That's something you can do right away. And to other points of things that you can do right away, you can make your voice heard by voting. The publishing industry is very actively involved in lawsuits and taking things to the courts. So Penguin Random House, the largest publisher in the world, Bertelsmann, they are actively in a lawsuit right now with lawmakers in Florida. And the goal of that is to obviously oppose laws that are going to affect the bottom line of a giant corporation like Penguin Random House. Fabulous. I'm so glad capitalism is helping us to, keep censorship down. I think that's great. Authors are also mobilizing. So there's a bunch of authors, Samira Ahmed, David Levithan, Andrew Davis Pickney. They created a coalition called Authors Against Book Bans, and they are actively involved in promoting the reasons why you need diverse books in your library. And there's lots of local chapters, right? So those are all things that people can be doing. But then the thing that I think that I can do the most, even though I work in this industry and this is what I do for my life, is that I can go to my fellow librarian and remind them that they're not alone, that they are doing something that is meaningful and real, and that it literally affected my life. Like a librarian put The House on Mango Street in my hands, and that changed my life, right? A librarian put The Color Purple in my hands, and that changed my life. And so I have to remind them, you're not alone, we're here with you, and we believe in what you're doing, and we can, do whatever it takes to help you and support you and remind you how much value your work is.
Great, great. Now, give us that title.
It's called The Free People's Village. It is an incredible, it's an eco alternative history novel that asks the question, what would have happened if Al Gore would have won the election? And it takes you through that, and it's incredible.
The Free People's Game.
Free People's Village. It's by Sim Kern. They are incredible on TikTok. They have a lot of amazing education that they could give all of us.
Excellent, excellent. Amanda, what do you leave us with? What can we do? And then give us that title of that book.
Vote. Use your libraries, though, because it's, use them. Check out the books. Use the resources. Go to the programming that shows the people that are in charge of the money and where to, that you're utilizing these resources. The book. It was tell me again what kind of book a book that changed my life?
I want to know. I want you to tell us about your book.
Oh, my own book?
Yes.
That library.
Oh, I was going to tell you about I Know When the Caged Bird Sings. It changed my life. My book is it's out there too. That library, I still can't believe I wrote a book, but because I'm a reader first and foremost. But you can give it to someone who you see spreads misinformation online about why books are being banned and censored, or the people that say they're not. There's no book bans because, you can buy it on Amazon. That's what I hear all the time. And I'm like, I have students that can't buy food and they don't have water and electricity. So no, they can't. If we don't have these books, they don't have access. So give it to someone who needs to understand how libraries work, or someone who wants to do the work but doesn't know how. Because it tells you how to set up your own coalitions and alliances, or you don't have to just to show up at a meeting and support. So,
excellent, Carissa. Where do we go from here? What should we do? And give us that book.
The book that changed my life, or what's the book?
How y'all get Changed My Life? I ain't saying nothing about Change Your Life.
What book am I supposed to be? What's?
This ain't Oprah.
I'll start with what we could do, and then I can go into the book. So what we could, it is I love coming to a place like DC. I love traveling. And it is very different than Texas. And so first, explore outside your bubble. I would encourage, because, and I say that as somebody, I live in Austin, which is its own bubble in Texas. And I'll also say all the urban cities in Texas are progressive. So that also is I want to just shout out that Texas is a very diverse and not nearly as conservative as I think a lot of the national narrative says. And then I want you to encourage you, one, to look at organizations in states where this is more prevalent, though it is happening everywhere. So, support organizations like mine, and support Amanda and folks who are doing the work in the states. But then also, I'm sure that there's a community that is close to you that is also engaging in some of these efforts, right? And it can be, change at a statewide level, at least from the perspective in Texas, is a lot slower. But what's happening in local communities, at local city councils, in local school districts, they are enacting and fighting back, or even proactively passing really good policies, or having their own banned book weeks, right? And supporting in your local communities is going to be something you can do tomorrow, whether or not you even have kids. I don't have children, right? But when I went to public schools in Texas, and I have an interest in making sure that all students in the state of Texas have a good quality education where they feel themselves represented in it. They feel proud to be from Texas. They feel proud to be American, and that looks very different than this whitewashed history that that a lot of folks, think they are trying to propose in order to protect the children. The children don't need protection from that. They need protection from, gun violence, from hunger. They don't need protection from books. And I think, engaging at the local level and supporting librarians, teachers who feel really isolated right now and are leaving, good teachers and librarians are leaving school districts because they feel so isolated, is something that you can do that can really, you can make change a lot, really quickly that way.
And what's the last book you read?
Oh, the last book I read The Power, which is a book about what would happen if women had this superpower and ruled the world, and how they, what it would look like if we lived in a matriarchal society.
I guess in November that's about to happen.
I know.
Oh, wait, can I say that? Sorry, I can't say that. Sorry, Kamau. And so take us home, Tiffany. Where do we go from here? What practical things can we do? And tell us about one of your books.
So one of the practical things, I learned this from Elliot Schrafer, who's an author, and he wrote Queer Ducks, which is a book that is banned all the time. And he taught me that in many school districts, books that have been taken off shelves, if they have an autograph, if they are signed by the author, they are considered like a historical archive. So learn about those books and check in with your school librarians, and then write the authors whose books are being pulled off. We will always send you book plates with our names on them. We love it. And if you can't get a hold of us, ask our publishers. So do that, because that will ensure that those books stay on the shelves.
Wait, are you saying they can sign our names?
No, we can sign them. We'll send book plates and stuff.
But you can sign my name if you want.
Right? I mean, how are they going to know anyway? I love that so much. And then the other thing is, okay, so if we really care about the children in our communities, we have to prove to them that we do. And we have to ask them, what do you need from us? What books are you not reading in the classroom? If somebody had asked me that, I would have said, I did not read a book about somebody like me, like a Black biracial girl, until I was 23. So that missed my whole childhood, right? I did not, I wrote about, okay, this is where I tell you about my own book now. So I wrote a book called Everything I Learned About Racism I Learned in School. And it's not just my story, but it is also an anthology. It includes about 16 other authors and some students' accounts of schooling. And in it, I wrote about the autobiography of Malcolm X, and how I took a class in college freshman year called Failure and Success in America. And we spent so much time on Mark Twain's Pudd'nhead Wilson that we didn't have time to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. So instead, we watched Thelma and Louise. Because they're so comparable. So, this is an example of things that, happen. And was it intentional on that professor? No. But nobody had even asked me, as a college student or as a student, what are you not learning about? What are you not reading? What is being taken out or away from you? And how can we get that back in your hands? And so whenever I go to schools, and I go to schools a lot because I'm an educator, my favorite thing to do with kids is to dream. And we are dreaming about what a world that is fair and just looks like. And you know what? It's really easy for the young folks in our lives to do that. Like, so easy. And then something happens around 12, and then they start getting deep into capitalism. And it's hard for them. So if you have young folks in your lives, do that dreaming with them, because they're the most incredible problem solvers ever. Sometimes, like, it's a stretch for us. But, like, really just spend that time with the young folks and, like, be the auntie, be the neighbor, be the teacher, be the person who's just going to listen to them and empower them to, like, stand up for themselves, and we can do that with them.
Yes.
Hi, I just have a simple question. How can we get this banned books list? I want to start a library with just banned books.
Yeah, it's different.
There's so many
Yeah, there's not one list. Like in Texas, there's a suggested audit list of like 850 books. But each school district is different, right? Yeah. You're the librarian, so.
Well, I was going to say that American Library Association puts out the State of Libraries report every year, and you can go and look and see the top 10 most challenged books. You could start there. PEN America provides lists. But yeah, I would start with the American Library Association's State of Libraries reports, because they'll go and talk about the top 10 most banned books. And you know, people like to say there's no agenda, and you go look at that top 10 list, there's an agenda. That's very obvious why they're challenged. But yeah.
Before we leave, I'll say that all the authors will have books outside sold by People's Bookstore.
We love People's Bookstore.
And Kamal's book, The Awkward Thoughts of W. Kamau Bell, and the subtitle is 100 words. Anybody got time to read that? Dr. Lauren Wells, who was on the previous panel, There Are No Deficits Here, Disrupting Anti-Blackness in Education. Let's take us out with this. Amanda, give us a word you love.
Word I love? I love the word reading. I know it's simple, but I just love
Apropos.
reading.
Carissa, a word you love.
Dang. Leadership.
Beautiful. Tiffany, a word you love.
Justice.
Justice. Antonio, a word you love.
Can I say the same one? No, akimbo. I love the word akimbo, and it's when your hands are like. And I just love that word, akimbo.
Got it. Having access to reading can give us an accessibility to real justice, but we need real leaders to be able to do that, and to be able to create and support that. We are all standing in akimbo. So thank you all so much for joining us. We done? Oh, right. We have one more sort of wrap-up session, but as our panelists are leaving, please give them a round of applause. And Kamau will join me back on the stage.
Please give us about 2 minutes. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
I don't think we need 2 minutes. We're good. We good. No. You need 2 minutes? No, I have had many minutes. So this is our wrap-up session.
Oh, hello. You'll never find. Okay.
Here's what I was thinking about that I'll start us off with, and I'm sure you can relate to this. Yes. There you go. Front and center. Front and center.
Trying to finally get a royalty.
Did you have books written by Black authors in your schooling, public schooling?
No. But I had a thing that's called a Black Mom.
Right.
And so when I think of books in my childhood, I don't think about the books in my school. I think about the books on the shelves in our house.
Right.
So that I know for sure, like, so when the movie The Color Purple comes out, the original one, I graduated from high school 5 years ago. That when it comes out, like, I go to my mom's shelf and reach for the book.
Right.
So when I think about, like, when I read Malcolm X, nobody assigned that to me. I think about the fact that, like, I was sort of already in a spirit of, like, most of the books that I want to read are not going to be in the walls of my school, you know?
Well, and in order for that to happen, here's what a lot of folks don't know, is that when books were de facto banned from schools and libraries that served and serviced black kids, one of the ways that black people resisted and fought back, Clara Villarosa went out and started a Human Bookstore in Denver. Blanche Richardson started Marcus Books in Oakland. James Fugate started SOM Books. Like, black people started bookstores, right? So you aren't gonna be able to, like, ban our books. We're gonna find a way. And so they built businesses to ensure that books got out into the community. You had librarians like Deborah Taylor and Judy Cooper at Enoch Pratt. So there are, like, these really sort of big things that have happened in our history that were done by people who were really serious and committed and fearless, and they took on these gargantuan tasks to make sure those books were available to our parents.
Yeah, and I feel like I have to tell my mom's story a little bit. So, because a lot of the things today are intersecting. I think she's still watching. She watched my panel. I don't know if she watched your panel.
My dad's probably watching mine, and he watched yours because he loves you. So.
Okay. She probably watched, I'm sure. But so my mom, when she was in grad school at Stanford University, was trying to get her PhD. This is the early 70s. Her PhD in African American literature. But she was told at Stanford at that time that that was not a legitimate area of study to focus your PhD on. So she dropped out. And then, so everybody thinks my mom's a PhD, she just didn't finish it. So then in the 80s, when you're talking about all these black bookstores, my mom spent her, and she was in schools in Indiana. She remembers when they integrated the schools. She remembers that she was put in remedial English in the white school just because she was black, all these stories. So then when she, in the 80s, when all these black bookstores opened up, my mom had spent her whole life collecting quotations by African Americans, and she realized at that point, people would call her because they knew she did when they needed a quote that a black person said for a speech or something. And so she self-published her own books of African American quotations in the 80s called Famous Black Quotations, because at that point there were no compendiums of African American quotation books. All the books quote books were by white people. And white quotes. So I remember those bookstores because my mom was in our house packaging books to send to those bookstores and selling them out of her car. And I would have to go to African American book festivals and book expos and sell the books that my mom was publishing in our house.
Dude, we have such a similar life. Because my father was one of the people, he owned a book distribution company, and he used to order the books from your mom.
Yeah.
And I remember
I probably
selling
packed
those
some
books.
of those books, yeah.
I remember selling those books. But I think this brings up an interesting sort of point that we sort of touched on a little bit today, the role of parents in this fight against book bans. And it's not enough just to complain, but what should we be doing in our homes? Do our shelves reflect the kind of world we claim we want for our kids?
And I'm going a step deeper. Does your algorithm on your phone reflect the kind of world that you want to live? Because that's a lot of what you're taking in. And if you're only taking in a certain type of, if you're not taking in this kind of information, then you're much less likely to share it. You're much less likely to promote it. You're much less likely to know about things. So for me, it's about like, even down to content of any kind, making sure that, like, me and my wife talk about this, that we're aware of what our kids are taking in, that we listen to them, and also that we sort of make sure that we put things in front of them that maybe they're not ready for yet, or maybe they weren't thinking about, because it is about actively sort of helping them expand their minds and being aware of what they're taking in on all levels.
You are really a genius.
Thank you. That's all time we got,
finished.
everybody.
Hold on. I hadn't finished.
I'm putting that in my bio. I'm just going to cut it off there.
We talked about both sides earlier. You are really a genius at being able to engage and interact with people from all sides and do it in a way, yeah, you can clap for that. You've seen it on CNN and ABC and just all over and in your documentaries. Is there a common ground that we can find with Moms of Liberty? Is there a common ground we can find with some of these folks?
Okay, those are two different questions, though.
Yeah.
Can we find a common ground with, like, when you say Moms of Liberty, I'm thinking the leadership of that organization?
I'm thinking of them as a metaphor.
Okay, great. So here's the thing. There are certainly forces aligned against all of us in this room that are intentionally trying to not find common ground with us. So don't waste your time trying to find common ground with those people, J.D. Vance. What I'm trying to say is, I have a little thing in my throat. I have learned that if you are clearly a bad faith actor, I'm gonna let you talk, but I'm not trying to change your mind. So on CNN, I talked to some bad faith actors. So I want you to keep talking. So I'm going to be congenial and I'm going to be charming and I'm going to, okay, keep going, indict yourself. But there's a difference between that and the person who's maybe like, maybe these Moms of Liberty have a good point. That's the person I can talk to. And those are the people who are sort of like, they just know what like you said, like your dad said, you only know what you know.
Right.
And I find all the time with people, I get emails or messages, social media thing, people who are like, I don't agree with a lot of what you say, but. And that but is where a lot of people, where I get a lot of people in there. Is the idea of like, there's a level of control or whatever that people are actively trying to convince people to vote against their self-interest and act against their self-interest. I'm also aware of the fact that a lot of the reason why I am who I am is because I moved from Chicago, at the time, still segregated, but it's super segregated when I was there, to the Bay Area, and suddenly I was just around lots of different people. And I get that that's a privilege to grow up and live around a lot of different people that most people in this country don't have. So when I meet people like, I don't understand X, Y, and Z, I'm like, I kind of understand why you don't understand that, but I think I can help you. But if you want to talk to me, I can help you get there.
Is there something to this notion that this idea of, in particular, wanting to silence conversations, instruction around the history of America, in particular as it relates to slavery, in particular as it relates to topics that will inspire, in particular, Black kids? Is there something to, when I was growing up, I remember only seeing books written by Black authors in our home. Majority books written by Black authors, or writers of color. I remember
there's always a Howard Zinn book in there.
Yeah, I remember seeing artwork, African Mask. I remember going.
Wait, do we live in the same house?
Pretty much. We've talked about this, and I remember growing up in this sort of environment where it was normal. Your Blackness was not anything that was othered or marginalized. You just felt like you were you. And so as I moved out into the world and became an adult, I moved in a way that I had a certain level of confidence where nothing could sort of, define me for me. And I wonder, is there sort of an effort to try to deny that? Is it that sinister?
Yes. I mean, I think that there's a lot of this gets caught up in the idea, and we talked about this earlier in the people. First of all, I just want to shout out to Amanda. Where are you, Amanda? Oh my God. Like my dad lives in Mobile, Alabama. The South, the Deep South is a real thing. And to hear you tell your story and to know what you're doing there, knowing what that area of the country is like, I also say it's whoo! But I think you know what that means. And I just want to thank you for I've done this, I've taken this. We say thank you for your service to people in the military. I'm just borrowing it for lots of people. Thank you for your service. That's all I want to say. Thank you. So, absolutely, there are forces aligned against the truth. so much so that now we can debate things that are just like are in the public square that are just like, you know, that are not debatable in a place where people are using facts, you know. So absolutely, I think that like when I think about and you know that depending on where you're in the country, those debates can be different, but it doesn't mean they don't happen in Berkeley either, which I want to be clear about. Everybody has an area where they're like, I don't want to go there, and the difference is, do you still go there when you don't want to go there?
Are you afraid, hopeful for your daughters? I mean, I have one daughter in the home. My oldest daughter is grown now, but I have a 16-year-old. And every day I think about ways to arm her, you know? To make sure she is able to get out into this world and know who she is, feel good about who she is, understand that she matters, and defines herself for herself. And it is just a challenge and a struggle every day. And I wonder how you have three girls at home, 8th, 3rd, and 1st grade.
8th grade, 5th grade, and 1st grade.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You did. Like Rich Lowerly, you mispronounced.
Yeah, so what do you and your wife think about? Like, how do you all deal with this?
I mean, so, you know, actively, like I don't think we take a lot for granted. I mean, I think, you know, it's funny, I'm an only child, so having 3 daughters is like, whoa. And then the fact that they're all so different, I'm just like, how does DNA work? So everyone has a different need, and I think a part of being a parent is recognizing this kid's need is different than this kid's need, this is different than this kid's need. But I said to one of my middle kid one time, who I call Kamal Jr., because she's very much like me. She's very internal and always in her head, and she just has a problem sometimes like confronting the anxiety, and I'm like, yep, you're welcome, I gave that to you. And she had a problem one time, and I was like, look, I just want you to understand that my only job is to protect you. And the protection can be a big word that means a lot. Part of that means feeding, housing. So like, whatever you need, I'm here for you, and I want you to feel like you can tell me whatever problem you're having. And so for me, this is what my mom did for me, creating that kind of like, this is a two-way conversation parenting. It's not a one-way conversation. Because I know that what is out there in the world, I can't imagine what you're going to confront when you get out there, but I at least want you to know that I think all my kids are capable, they're smart, they're future world changers. I'm a Nepo the heck out of them because I don't believe my job is to make their lives easier. I cleaned it up. But like, absolutely, I can only be helpful if I feel like you are well prepared for the world. And the only way I can know you're well prepared for the world is you feel free to ask me when you feel like you're not well prepared.
So you're talking about love. So let's end it here. What role does love play in this topic that we're talking about today in book banning? How does love come into the picture? Like, that's a broad question.
I feel like you want to answer that question. I want you to answer that question.
When I was growing up, I was a pretty precocious kid. I got into trouble a lot. Why are you laughing?
Because they believe it.
And so, whatever, Kaylee. And so my mother would send me to my room, which she knew I hated because I loved to be around people. So it was like a double punishment. And so I'm in my room and I'm like, I hate this woman. And so inevitably she'd walk into the room and she would recite a poem or sing a song, something funny. So she'd come into my room and she'd say, like, folks, birthing is hard and dying is mean, so why not get yourself a little loving in between? And I start laughing. And then she's like, job done, she'd walk out. And I'd be mad because I wasn't mad anymore. So my daughter, who's very spirited and brilliant, she when she gets upset, she goes into her room. And so I would go into her room and start making jokes, trying to get her to laugh. And she never really responded well to that, but I just kept doing it because it's what I knew. And one day she said to me, "You know, Dad, sometimes it's okay to sit with your anger." And I was like, oh, shit. You're right. I have no idea what that has to do with the answer. But I think because love is about, I'm a grown man now, and I'm still learning how to love my daughter in the best way. And there's still room for me to learn. She's teaching me so much, even at this age. And I feel like if we care about our students, if we care about each other, if we care about humanity, I think that there is always room for us to learn and grow. And we don't have all the answers, but let's acknowledge that we still have some stuff that we can learn. I don't know, maybe that's what I think about when I think about love and all these challenging things we're dealing with, like book banning.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Whew, that was tough.
That was good. I turned it on you. I turned it on you.
That was that CNN. You brought that back
No,
on.
I did. Yeah, I did that. I learned that. Yeah, Anderson Cooper taught that to me. No, just kidding. So I think what I hear you saying in there, and this is where it is, love is not. I think love gets associated with softness a lot, like sort of romantic love or the romantic comedy meet cute love.
Mm-hmm.
Love is not always soft. Love can be inconvenient. It can be challenging. It can be scary. And part of me loving my kids, and this is part of what Amanda's doing because I'm just so impressed, is saying like, I love you so much, I want you to know the truth. It would be so great if I didn't have to tell my kids about the transatlantic slave trade.
Right?
It would be so awesome.
Right.
It would be so awesome if I didn't have to tell my mixed race kids who are mixed black and white about how because you're darker, you're going to figure the words like this, but because this one, you're going to pass, you're going to hear some things. It would be so great if I could love them enough that they didn't have to do that. But again, as I phrase it, and protection means a lot, my job is to protect you, which means I have to share with you, where did I hear the phrase inconvenient truths from? Inconvenient truths with you, because if I don't do it, and this is where I shout out to my mom, I'm being a negligent bad parent. And if an educator doesn't do it, they're being a negligent educator. And if a librarian doesn't do it, they're being a negligent librarian. If they're like, oh, you want to find out about the history of the world? And they give you like, well, Ted Cruz wrote this book about the history of the world. That's bad librarian. Am I right about that? Is that bad? We have the Ted Cruz, the DeSantis, the Greg Abbott history of the world. That's bad librarian, bad parenting, bad teaching. So for me, when love ties into this, is that because, and I'm on the board of Donors Choose, an organization to support teachers' projects, so I really believe in public schools, that part of it is like, and teachers love their students. Most teachers come out of their pocket for their students at some point. It happens across all schools. I love you so much because I'm your teacher, I'm your librarian, I'm your parent, I'm a community member, I'm the person who lives across the street from you, that I have to allow you access to the truth, or else I don't love you.
On behalf of the 6'4" African-American, heterosexual, cisgender, left-leaning, asthmatic, black and proud blurred, mama's boy dad, and stand-up comedian Kamau Bell, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to thank the Aspen Institute for their amazing vision, for their hard work. Thank you, Kaylee and Danielle, for everything you all have done for this. I want to thank Kamau's team. I want to thank Tori and Sarah Grace on my team. I want to thank all the panelists the librarians, the publishers, the students, the authors, the nonprofits, the professors. I want to thank all of you and definitely the MLK Library for hosting us. Anything you want to add?
No, you know what to do. Go out there and make the world a better place. I always say, friends don't let friends not vote.